Welcome to today's run in Soulstone Survivors, where I try to finish the game as fast as possible. Now there are other ways that are better, for example with the mage, but I want to go over the warrior today because I'm not focusing on him anymore. So, I want to have this uploaded so I have it as a reference in the future until I work on him again. But I will also talk about some other topics that will make him very good in the future. And I just wrote it down that I don't forget about it later on. So what you see right here is it already started. I have the second weapon. It seems like it has more area, but the main benefit is it applies bleed. That is heavy strike, but the second version of it. We also have subdue, which is a very interesting one. This one deals extra damage if the target has bleed applied to it. And it applies fragility. Fragility is a bonus. You deal 20% bonus damage per 10 seconds. And if I'm not mistaken, depending on the bleed amount that is on the enemy, it applies fragility. Now, we have to check this out later if we see it and what's going on there. But I'm pretty sure this is how it works, because I usually get multiple stacks on the enemies at once. If not, well, then that's not the case, but otherwise that is bonkers, since if they have 10 stacks, that's 200% bonus damage. So what we have right here, talking about rerolls maybe and banishes, because there's nothing too exciting going on my choices. I think rerolls should be mainly used for weapons, to make sure that you get them. Whenever you have to waste a level up for a weapon that you don't want to have, then, you have to get rid of it later, and you might also get offered stuff just because you have a ranged weapon. And I usually want to avoid that, since, well, then you don't have to waste a level up, or get a bad choice. So, for example, if you don't want to have fire, and now you're forced into fire, then a level up can show up that buffs up fire weapons, and you have only one that you were forced to take, so that's really bad. Aside from this, optimal scenarios, obviously, you only use the rerolls for buffs here. We see the banishes right now. I tend to usually just banish whatever is bad, whatever is weak that I don't want to see again. Sometimes I also banish when I hope for something very good in that moment, so that's the hopium, but that's not, always the best decision. And here's a case where I wasn't sure which one I should go for, and my decision was the electric one. First of all, it's a decent skill, but mainly, I also have an electric skill, and I will go over them now. But by the same logic that I applied before, we don't want to have too many elements, because if I had the holy one or the fire one, then I could have offers for them, and now I just have a second electric skill, and I want to have the other one. Right here, the priority, by the way, in general. My priority is area into attack speed, sometimes more attack speed, depending on how much area I have, depending on how much attack speed I have, then crit and damage. However, buffs on the main weapons, mostly for area, as well as potency on the Berserker buff. These are the ones that I tend to pick up, since you want to have a ton of attack speed from them. The buff is ginormous. And yeah, so here for example, attack speed on the buff, this was out of question. It's a very strong skill. So we already talked about having heavy strike. We also talked about subdue, the one with per bleed stack on the enemy you deal bonus damage, and it applies fragility. Next up we have the Berserker Rage. This is just bonus attack speed. It also gives movement speed, which is not too important. Then we have Might, which gives you bonus attack. I'm honestly not too sure. Right now I have Piercing Shout, because there was no better option. I'm not sure which one of these two is better. Like, having more attack is great to go beyond certain thresholds, and we will talk about the Frozen Warhammer later, by the way. As well as the Ground Slam, if I don't forget it. But I'm overall not sure which one is better. You want to kill the enemies as fast as possible, so you progress as fast as possible, but then you also want to kill the boss as fast as possible. So an optimal scenario might actually be that you go for damage, to always make sure that you can go for area and attack speed, but have damage boost. And then afterwards, before the boss spawns, the final one, you will go for Piercing Shout to penetrate his armor, but this depends on how much armor he has, and I have no idea. Next up we have Thrust. This is just applying bleed, which is great with the synergy with our fragility, and it increases the crit rate on the enemy. So here's the point where I was arguing with myself: do I want to get rid of Piercing Shroud, or do I want to... Piercing Shout. Or do I want to get rid of the bonus damage? I decided to go for the Piercing Shout. I think the piercing shout helps a lot with the tanky ogres that you see walking around here, but to be honest, you can just kill everyone else and ignore them. I don't think you should really focus on the super tanky guys if there are a bazillion of weak enemies walking around, but yeah. So, something that got added here is, you deal more damage but you have a longer cooldown. That sounds horrible to me. You will see that I will never pick it. Reason being, I want to spam my ability to kill enemies as fast as possible, right? I mean, obviously you want to have a certain attack threshold, but if I focus on attack speed, then I don't want to have a longer cooldown, which I assume is just the opposite of attack speed. Both seem to have the same effect at least, hopefully, because otherwise I'm totally wrong on this. So over here you will often see situations where I decide for something that may be a little bit questionable. Keep in mind, my experience in this game is very limited, and when I make videos like this or when I explain why I pick something and it sounds like I want to pretend to be an expert, I'm just selling to you why I did something. Is this the best thing? No. Do I believe it's the best thing? Well, yes, otherwise I wouldn't have done it, right? But that doesn't mean that I think there is no other way of doing this better. So, usually I tend to just ignore the bosses. The boss fights are also relatively easy. I try to stay as close as possible to them when I fight a boss. This will cause him to make the slam around him, and if you dodge the moment the cycle or the circle is filled up, then you don't take any damage. It doesn't knock you back, you don't take damage, but you risk that you mess it up. On the upside, you're right next to the boss, and it's more likely that you hit him. I think you will see it here. No, I actually just circle around for the farming, yeah. It doesn't matter. There's no benefit in killing the boss earlier. I think all the kills are accounted for that you make while the boss is there. I might even be wrong with this, and the earlier you kill the boss, the earlier the counter starts. But at least when I experimented, there was no difference. Like, do you see how we are at 960 out of 1.5k? But this boss spawned at 850, which is more than 100 kills ago. So I do believe all the kills that I made while he was there, they are accounted for. Just to explain that. Now, I did mention ice. Why could ice be interesting in general? When I started playing this game and I started going for some record runs in quotation marks, as in I want to get a feeling on how it works, what works well, which character is the best one, I took ice usually, just as an alternative if I couldn't pick something better, and then I would wait for the skill that applies fragility for every stack of chill that is on the enemy. And there is a power up or an upgrade that will apply ice or freezing or chill, yeah, it's called chill, whenever you attack with a low chance. This was actually buffed now. I think it used to be 13% or 16%, now it's 20%, which is quite a lot. And that just means additional fragility, which catapults up the damage you deal to the enemies. And this can be quite insane. Like, even if you watch here, a lot of these enemies end up having fragility applied from my attacks because they also had bleed on them. And sometimes this can be the difference between a single hit or a multi-hit. And yeah, here we see it again. I always go for AoE. In the end, it's just dancing around and hoping for the best resource. I'm not convinced that the corner strategy just by standing in the corner is the best version. I think you want to constantly walk around and into the enemies, for which it might actually be good. By the way, this is always potency for the rage buff. The other one was also amazing, maybe it would have paid off more, but in my opinion, having stronger weapons in this very moment is better than going for experience bonus and stuff like this. Let me talk about that later. So first of all, with the corner, I think it's good to be in the corner, but you don't want to be too close that it allows the enemy to spawn right in the corner. I have a feeling whenever you're right in the corner, so just not moving, where they just spawned, the masses there, it's worse. And you want to move around that you can move into them and kill them. Do you see how I move around and they constantly keep respawning to my right now? And yeah, now they didn't respawn to the right there. And I think this happens because I was too close. There we have more lethality. Crit is always good. Crit is honestly mainly for the boss, but it also helps to just kill the enemies. One thing that I will consider is replacing the heavy strike with something else. But the thing is, by the way, there you saw the dodge. The thing is, the bleed effect is so good since it applies fragility with the subdue, you know, and I kind of don't want to get rid of that. It's a really tough call. In the end, just having a better clear time is obviously better than having a faster killing time on the boss, as long as the clear time makes up for that, right? And I have to figure that out. There's a lot in general that I have to figure out. In the end, in this game, a lot comes down to what are you offered when, and I usually want to reset until I get something good when I start this game. Funny enough, this one here was not good. Like, this was not a good start to the game. If you would look at my upgrades, I think the first one was just an upgrade to my base weapon. Is it one that gives it a double strike? It doesn't look like a double strike. It was some sort of upgrade, probably AoE or so, that I took it. Then next up we have a bonus, I think for physical weapons, but it could also be melee weapons. Maybe it's melee weapons looking at it. Could also be physical though. And after that I just got subdue. So there are no good upgrades here, and yet this run is a sub 13, which means there's a lot of room to grow, obviously. Now maybe I will actually stick to the melee guy. I like him a lot, I like his playstyle the most, he is a ton of fun, and he's the one where moving around pays off the most. On the Archer, there are actually both ways that you can play, with the triple arrow that applies fragility because fragility is broken, however you're lacking AoE, but you know what to do? you just apply the fragility to the boss, and for the rest you use incredible AoE abilities like the meteor strike, not the single one, but the multi-hitting one, and that's it. You don't care about the main weapons, you will never buff it up unless there's attack speed bonus. I don't even know if attack speed bonus exists as an individual weapon upgrade. That one is worth it though, that one is really good. Let's talk about one that I didn't really talk about, which is the thunder strike that we have. Or thunderclap? I actually didn't write down the name there. Yeah, thunderclap is its name. So this one is incredibly powerful. I don't even know why, really, but it's overall really strong. Whenever you see incredibly large numbers, like a 4k or so, that's from the thunderclap there. And yeah, it's really good. Especially when it crits, there was a 4.5k there. It's probably the strongest skill that I know of that I can use as a melee player. And this one wipes out bosses. Now, in general talking, what you want to have is multi-attacks. Multi-attacks help so much to clear the enemies. You will see that in the beginning, a lot of the enemies just took 2 strikes. So if you have a double attack, this is obviously a lot better than having a single attack, and you can stack these up, right? You can have a bonus attack on melee weapons, you can have a bonus attack on physical weapons, and then for example you can also have a bonus attack, I think per weapon, also exists very rarely, and for the thunderclap, you can also have a bonus attack just for electric weapons, which applies all the other ones as well, because it's also physical, and it's also melee, which means this one, whenever you attack with it, goes off 4 times. Do you know how fast bosses die when you attack them 4 times with the same skill that deals 4.5k damage right now, where all the other ones deal 600? Yes, it's ridiculous. It's incredibly strong. Now, probably the second most important skill, if not the most important skill that I have, is the Berserker Rage. The bonus attack speed is incredible, and I remember I had a scenario where I got its cooldown down so far that it would recast multiple times. Like, it would go off and then it would last for 10 seconds, but the cooldown was only 8 seconds, so it would cast again. And when I checked the stats out, they didn't line up. Like, let's say it's plus 100% and I was at 100%, then it's at 200%, right? And then I would get another 100% and I think it went to 400%. I say I think because the stats that I just said were made up and I couldn't figure out what exactly went on there. But my theory is that it applies its own buff as a bonus. This might be fixed now. I saw someone write a comment that it's fixed. But this obviously makes it bonkers, right? Attacking 2 times as fast is amazing, but attacking 4 times as fast is absolutely crazy. And now we're about to spawn the final boss, and you will see Thunderclap doesn't choke around. This one is crazy. So yeah, I will just circle around and this is so sad. I messed it up there. I got nervous when I noticed that I'm a sub 13 and I didn't want to mess this up. There it worked, where you can just dash through. You can obviously also dash out, you know, nothing will ever happen. But there we go, he is dead. Now the usual confusing dance that I do, where I just run around because I don't know where I'm supposed to go. I think I was checking out something here, but yeah, I bump into this wall and then I go to the bottom right, I think, and realize, oh yeah, there's the next wall, and now to the middle, please add a cursor. And that was it. The 12 minutes and 38 on the melee class.